If you think prehistoric life was just about fire, hunting, and cave paintings, think again. Because 30,000 years ago, in a cold, wind-blown cave in northern Spain, archaeologists uncovered something so horrifying, so inhuman, that it shattered everything we thought we knew about our earliest ancestors. This wasn't just survival. This was something else. Something darker. Something that left behind bones, broken not by time or accident, but deliberately cracked open from the inside out. And the worst part, some of those bones were shockingly small. Too small to belong to an adult. In the highlands of El Sidrón, a limestone cave system winds through the Asturian mountains like a forgotten throat. To most of the world, it's just another ancient cave in a region known for Neanderthal remains. But to the small team of researchers who first entered it in 1994, it would soon become ground zero for one of the darkest discoveries in the history of prehistoric anthropology. The remains inside were scattered, chewed, and broken, but not by animals. These weren't victims of a hunt. These were victims of something worse. It didn't make sense at first. There were 12 individuals in total, men, women, and children. One child was barely 18 months old. Yet their bones were all found cracked open, exposing the marrow. Cut marks lined ribs, joints, and skulls. And then came the pattern. Not a random massacre, but methodical dismemberment. As if some people, had turned on their own. What was once a family had become a feast. And the question that haunted researchers was simple. Why? Was it starvation? Madness? Ritual? Or was this just what they did? What you're about to hear isn't fiction. These were real people, Neanderthals. They buried their dead with care. They made tools, maybe even loved. But when winter came, and survival slipped away like smoke in the wind, some tribes made a choice. They looked at their children, not as sons or daughters, but as food. And El Sidrón is just the beginning. The El Sidrón cave site, buried deep in the forested mountains of northern Spain, had long been a mystery. Its twisted corridors are cold, damp, and pitch black. Even with modern lighting, stepping inside feels like walking into the lungs of something ancient. But back in 1994, when amateur cavers stumbled on the first bones there, no one imagined they had just unearthed one of the most disturbing scenes in human prehistory. 12 Neanderthal individuals, men, women, teenagers, children, had all died around the same time, roughly 49,000 years ago. Their skeletons weren't neatly arranged. They were shattered. Ribs split down the middle. Femurs cracked lengthwise. Skulls caved in with tool marks. It was as if someone had taken apart each body with the precision of a butcher, not the reverence of a mourner. But it wasn't until 2006 that the horror began to crystallize. A team led by Spanish paleoanthropologist Antonio Rosas re-examined the bones, using microscopic analysis. What they found was undeniable evidence of cannibalism. The marks on the bones matched those made by stone tools, cleavers, scrapers, flint blades. The ends of long bones had been cleanly removed to access the marrow, one of the richest sources of fat during starvation. Skulls had been peeled open, likely to eat the brain. Even worse, many of the bite marks and butcher signs were concentrated on juvenile skeletons. One child was estimated to be just 2 years old. Another may have been an infant. Their bones were not buried, not burned, not protected. They were processed. There were no signs of external attack. No predator teeth. No competing species. No war. This wasn't the aftermath of a battle. This was internal. According to carbon dating and pollen analysis, the deaths occurred in winter, likely during a time of extreme resource scarcity. That region of Spain, though lush in summer, turns brutally cold in winter. Food would have been scarce, and Neanderthals, with no long-term food storage or farming, lived season to season. When meat disappeared, desperation began. This wasn't the only site, either. In Moulagursi Cave in France, remains of 6 Neanderthals, also including children, showed identical patterns. Split bones, flint-cut marks, marrow extraction. The evidence pointed to a grim possibility. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was part of their survival playbook. But it's not just about hunger. Some researchers believe there's more beneath the surface. Ritual, dominance, or even psychological fracture. Anthropologist Tim White, who has studied cannibalistic patterns across species, proposed a chilling question. What if this wasn't desperation but culture? It's possible that in these prehistoric communities, when food ran out, hierarchies dissolved. What once was love became threat. The old, the weak, the young became expendable. And in the cave of El Sidrón, there's something even more disturbing. DNA tests confirmed that all 12 individuals were related. A single family group. Brothers, parents, offspring. Someone, maybe the father, may have consumed his own children. And yet the cave was sealed, buried by a rockfall shortly after the deaths, locking this moment in time like a prehistoric tomb, untouched for 49,000 years, until now. But one question still remains unanswered. Who ate whom first? When the DNA analysis was completed, it painted a picture no one was ready for. Among the 12 individuals in El Sidrón, at least 3 were direct children of the adult male. 2 more were likely siblings. The group was a nuclear family, not just in terms of genetics, but social structure. They lived together, hunted together, slept beside one another night after night, under the echoing breath of that limestone cave. So how did it come to this? Some researchers argue it was starvation-induced psychosis, a mental breakdown triggered by extreme cold and hunger, the kind that fractures the human mind into something primitive, where reasoning collapses and instinct takes over. But others aren't so sure. There's a growing theory in anthropology known as survival prioritization. It suggests that during extreme resource scarcity, early humans may have developed dark, unspoken hierarchies, where the weakest became offerings to preserve the strongest. And in most cases, the youngest were at the bottom of that invisible chain. It sounds unthinkable, but think about this. In modern psychology, there's a phenomenon known as depersonalization under stress, where individuals under extreme trauma begin to see loved ones not as people, but as objects. Objects of burden, of resentment, or of use. Now imagine a father staring into the vacant eyes of his starving child, knowing there's no food left. And then imagine that same man looking at his child's bones days later, cleaned, cracked, and hollow. Was it survival? Or something far worse? Because here's the final twist. Among the tools found at El Sidrón were not just blades, but carefully sharpened scrapers, used for skinning. And among the bones? Scratches consistent with defleshing. But not just of muscle. Of faces. Yes, some skulls, including those of the children, had markings on the cheekbones and eye sockets, deliberate ones. The kind you make when you remove a face. There's no nutritional value in facial tissue. No reason to strip it. Unless you're sending a message. Some believe the act wasn't just for food. It was psychological, ritualistic, a final obliteration of identity, a way to erase the person you loved, to unsee the horror you committed, and to live with it. And here's where the story turns cold again, because to this day, no one knows if the people who committed these acts even left the cave. The rockfall that sealed El Sidrón might not have been natural. It could have been deliberate, a mass grave sealed in shame. Or worse, a punishment. There's no record, no writing, no witness, just a pile of bones. And when you step into El Sidrón today, even as a tourist, the silence is suffocating. Because deep in the darkness of that ancient cave, you're not just looking at the past. You're standing in the exact spot where a family destroyed itself, not out of hate, but out of hunger. And the question that remains isn't just what they did. It's this: would you have done the same?